What's up, everybody? My name is Galson Anthony, the best to ever do it. And this time around on the G2G podcast, I decided to go a little bit different. Instead of doing politicians and celebrities, I decided let me go a little bit of the route of diplomatic. I have the ambassador or deputy ambassador, the Jaji de. Oh my goodness,
Charge d'affaires.
he will help me get it right. A deputy ambassador of Israel. How you doing?
Hey, good morning.
Now, I pronounce your name as Ariel.
Correct.
Is that the same name that the mermaid creature was?
Ariel. Yeah. Well, she's spelled with double L-E.
Double L-E.
And mine is spelled A-R-I-E-L.
Okay.
It's actually a Hebrew name. The translation would be Lion of God.
Lion of God.
Yeah, but it's a biblical name. It was one of the
That's
names
a
of
really
Jerusalem.
cool name.
Yeah.
Lion of God. Why didn't I get a name like that? Welcome to the studio. So, how long have you been in South Africa and how long have you been serving? Where have you served before? Just to give us a little background.
Yeah, so I arrived in South Africa in August. So it's been almost 6 months. Before this, I spent a year in headquarters where I was in the Asia department. And before that, Thailand and India. So I did 3 years in Thailand, 3 years in India.
Then you're here. So given that South Africa is like a very diverse and a very opinionated country and you've been here for 6 months, what's your experience been like? Now, I mean, give me the whole wide experience.
Yeah, it's been an experience for sure. When it comes to, well, in general, I'll say obviously the weather's great, nature, people are nice. So it's actually a really nice place to live. It's a much slower pace than Bangkok, which is quite an adjustment for us. When it comes to Israel, it's an interesting country because, in many countries, the people are very pro-Palestinian or against Israel. When you look at the West mostly, whereas the governments have very close relationships with Israel. And South Africa is kind of the opposite, where the government has a very negative stance towards Israel, but the people on the street are very pro-Israel. I mean, everyone I've met so far is mostly Christian. So maybe a lot of it comes from like Christian values and that kind of connection to Israel. And overall, I would say I found a lot more positive feelings towards Israel than negative ones.
You basically saying that the media shows pro-Palestine, but the regular man in the street tends to show pro-Israel or have no issues with Israel.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's assume that 90% of the people don't really care about this conflict, and fair enough.
Most people actually don't until they protest. They're like, hey, they get a little headline and they protest against whatever headline suits them. Do you feel that's the experience?
Of course. I mean, I always ask people in Israel, when they ask me about how people feel about Israel, wherever I am, I tell them, well, what's your take on the coup in Myanmar?
And they don't know what that means.
Yeah, they don't even know there was a coup. So the average South African, why would he care about a conflict happening, 10-hour flight away that doesn't affect him in any way? The thing with Israel and Palestine, it became kind of a global cause. So I think it's very easy to get behind a global cause. So maybe climate change would be a good example where, climate change became a global cause. All the young people were protesting for protecting the climate. So maybe pro-Palestine kind of became that cause. So people are so they get behind that. Everybody wants to be, behind a good cause.
They want to stand for something.
Yeah, they want to stand for a good cause. They probably don't understand it. I mean, you've seen the videos probably on YouTube where they ask someone, they're yelling from the river to the sea, and then they ask them which river and which sea. And of course, nobody knows the geography, right? Like all those kids. And they don't understand the meaning. River is the Jordan River, sea is the Mediterranean, of course. And river to the sea, Palestine will be free means there is no Israel, because that's the whole state of Israel. So yeah, I would say, like, I agree with you. 90% probably don't care. There is some affinity to Israel, which is maybe a religion-based affinity.
Which we will get into. We'll get into pretty
deep.
Yeah,
cool. And then there's a small percentage that's very pro, one side or the other. There's probably small percentages on either side.
But it's one thing I've always asked myself. It's like being racist is bad. You can't say nothing about white people, black people, and good and well. But if you're anti-Semitic, oh my goodness, it's like worse than being racist. What is the case? Give me is it historical background or is it the Jews, so to put it? I mean, for lack of a better word right now, are a sensitive people? Give me a reason why being racist is better than being anti-Semitic.
That's a good question. Do you feel that in South Africa or globally? Because I would say in the West.
Globally, so more in the West. True.
Okay, so in Europe, they didn't have black people, until recent history, and anti-Semitism was a big issue. Whereas in Africa, I would assume that racism is a bigger issue than anti-Semitism because they didn't have so much anti-Semitism here. So you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I would guess that in Africa or in South Africa, being a racist, saying something against blacks would go harder than saying something against Jews. Is that correct?
I guess on the ground, but the moment we get to the internet, say for example, I don't watch how I take this interview, and everybody knows me to be quite, heavy on the interview. They just might block, they might just censor it a little bit. So that's why I'm trying to get that answer. Maybe you have a better
Yeah,
background.
I mean, obviously it's a long historical issue, and then the Holocaust is a huge wound, I would say, and in our collective conscious or collective history, there hasn't been a genocide on that scale in any time in history. A third of the Jewish people were killed during the Holocaust. And now, if you know this, but today there are less Jews in the world than there were in 1939. So the Jewish people have not yet recovered. So at least, and again, I'm looking from a Western point of view. This is obviously a huge issue, whereas in Israel, we don't have racism in the sense of black, white. It doesn't really exist. We have, it's a migrant country, right? It's only been there for 77 years.
Right, since 48.
Yeah, since 1948. And when the country started, I would say roughly 50% migrated from Europe post-World War II, and the other 50% migrated from the Arab countries. They were fleeing the Arab countries, Northern Africa. And then throughout our existence, we had a big migration from Ethiopia. We had a migration from post-Soviet Union in the 90s. We had a big migration from India. So it's a very multicultural, kind of diverse country, and race is not an issue. If I look at just in my family, my wife her mother's from Spain, and her father's a few generations in Israel, but originally from Morocco. And my sister is married to an Argentinian. The other sister is married to an Indian. Another sister married, I think he's Moroccan, I'm
You
guessing.
think is the family too big?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where he's from originally
Yeah,
because, again, we're all
it's
Israeli.
mixed. Yeah.
So,
Well, that
yeah.
does sound like my background because I think off camera we did explain my background,
Yeah.
and even my sons, they all mix, so to put it. But before we get into those things, because there are portions of the podcast where I want to get deeper into that, I want to ask. So 48 was when the state of Israel was there, and 48, 49 actually was when apartheid came to South Africa. The Holocaust was terrible; it was a genocide, and apartheid was like a a foul against humanity, a crime against humanity. I don't know how to ask this question, but which one do you think is more worse? And do you think on both sides there's like post-trauma PTSD about it?
Well, I would guess it depends who you ask. If you ask a Jew, or if you ask a South African, right? I mean, obviously we suffered one, you suffered the other. And I mean, how can you compare? I wouldn't even know how to start comparing. Um, I would guess that a genocide where 6 million people were killed would probably be higher on the crime level than apartheid, which was like an inherent racism, discrimination. But obviously there's no comparison. There's definitely a post-trauma. I mean, Israel's been described as a post-traumatic country by various people. I could speak as an Israeli. The way we think, the way we operate, the way security is like our number one measure, the way we view Israel as a safe place for the Jewish people. A lot of that has to do with the Holocaust, of course. We're all second or third generation. In South Africa, of course, apartheid ended, but it still resonates today. I mean, the issues are still there, and it takes generations. Look at the U.S. I mean, the Civil War was, 150 years ago, more than 150 years ago, and there's still black-white issues, right? Sure, it's much better, of course. I mean, we had a president who was black, etc., but the issues are still there. The undercurrents are there. So I think these things take generations. And we'll talk about, I guess, when we talk about Israel-Palestine, but reconciliation is not a one-time thing. This is something that takes
Time to get big.
yeah, and then every generation. I mean, your son is born to a different world than you were. It's a different world than your parents were, and then that affects who they are and how they feel.
Fair enough. Speaking of the Israel-Palestine, if you could just break it down to me, and I know it's not that simple, but in simple words as possible, what's the beef between the two countries?
It's territory. I mean, it's a territorial dispute. I know it's portrayed as many other disputes, religion, whatever. Religion is obviously an issue. But it's a territorial dispute. There's two groups of people that claim ownership on the same land. I mean, I think in that sense it's very simple. Obviously, nothing's simple here, but simple in the sense that two people want to live in this place. They don't get along, unfortunately. It would have been much easier if we could get along, and just live happily together. Israel, since its establishment, since 1948, has been on the defense, right? In 1947, the UN, the Partition Plan, Resolution 181, decided to divide British Palestine at the time, the mandate, to an Arab state and a Jewish state. It wasn't Palestinian because there was no term Palestinians then. It was just right because it was all the Ottoman Empire before. The Jews accepted it, the Jewish leadership at the time, and the Arab leadership rejected it. The day, or even before the Brits left, but when the Brits left, started the war, which we call Independence War. The Palestinians would call Nakba, which means disaster. And of course, the Jewish state survived, even though we were invaded by 7 different countries, all the neighboring Arab countries. And not only we survived, the borders were actually widened bigger than what we received in the UN resolution. So the Green Line, West Bank, 97, all these terms basically refer to the ceasefire line of 1949. And then we had, there was a 56 war, which is a bit smaller. There was a 67 war, which is the big war, which created this whole issue. And again, all of the Arab neighboring countries were planning to invade Israel. Israel had a preemptive attack, right, taking out all the Air Force. I don't know if you know that story.
I do.
Yeah, so it's an amazing story militarily. And then Israel conquered all these territories, which are the West Bank, the Golan Heights, Sinai, and the Gaza Strip. Up until then, there was no such thing as Palestinians because the people living there were either Jordanian or Syrian or Egyptian, right? So there was no Palestinians. And this is...
But wasn't Palestine, or at least the word, there in the early 19th centuries versus Israel being there in 1948?
Yeah, British Palestine. It was called British Palestine.
It was
in the
called British?
Bible. In the
Correct.
Bible, you have the Palestines, right?
Yeah, the Philistines.
Yeah, the Philistines. So I'm guessing that's where it comes from.
Yeah, it came from that and evolved to Palestine.
Correct. And then Israel. If you look at British passports, it's funny, I was seeing this on, I think on Instagram the other day, someone was showing her British passport that says Palestine. But when you open it up, it says Israel numerous times in it, right? So they call it the land of Palestine, the land of Israel. So it's kind of, they use both terms. But yes, the Brits called it British Palestine. But they weren't Palestinians. So I guess they took the name Palestinians later on from this. But up until 1918, it was the Ottoman Empire. There was no Jordan, there was no Lebanon, there was no Syria, right? There was all Ottoman Empire. Then World War I, Sykes-Picot Agreement, this was all divided into these countries. There was still no Jordan or Israel, right? It was all British mandate. Only later, Jordan was created in 1947. Israel was created in 1948, and all those other countries, Lebanon, Syria, etc., were created.
Lebanon may have been there a lot longer.
Not as a country, Lebanon, right? It was a French...
as a nation. They were there as a nation.
Not the Lebanon of today.
Well, I don't know if the Lebanon, the country, as a sovereign state, but the Lebanese were there.
Right, but today, the Lebanese country today is a much larger territory, which is why they had the big civil war. There's all these tribes that didn't get along. It was much smaller, what you're talking about. But yes, also the Hashemite, kingdom was there, but just not as a sovereign state.
Right.
So until 1948, again, there's no division really, or the different divisions, not the ones that we have today, these sovereign states. And then these sovereign states are created. Jordan takes what is called the West Bank today, right, which is the West Bank of the Jordan River, and they all become Jordanian, all the people living there. And the people in Sinai are Egyptian. And then in 1967, Israel takes over these territories. The Jordanians move out or lose that territory. The Egyptians lose this territory. Syria loses the Golan Heights. Golan Heights was annexed by Israel. They're Israeli, so there's no real dispute over there. Sinai, Israel gave back in the peace agreement with Egypt. So we're left with the Gaza Strip, which was occupied by Egypt. By the way, Egypt never annexed it, so it was always under occupation. And we have the whole West Bank, which is now people who are under some kind of military control. They were Jordanian. They still have Jordanian passports, the majority of them. But now they're being kind of separated from Jordan and not part of Israel because they're not annexed, as opposed to East Jerusalem, which is a whole different story. So now these people start, I would say, creating an identity, which develops over time. I want to say that the first use of the word Palestinians to describe them is in 1978. I can't guarantee that, but this is Yasser Arafat, head of PLO. He starts viewing this as a nation, as a people.
Because, the argument with any Palestinian is like Israel didn't exist in 1948 and Palestine existed, right? So Israel don't actually own that land. This is according to the Palestinians. This is not according to me. And that argument has always been going through and through. And then you gave me a little history, some of the new history I'm learning now. Then we have the Zionists and we have the Hamas. What is your take between these two? How do you feel about what they are and what they stand for? And do the Palestinians and the Israelis actually agree with what they're doing?
Well, first of all, some claim that Jesus was Palestinian. I mean, these claims, and it's something I wanted.
I would argue one day he's Palestinian, one day he's Jewish
I've
because
seen white
of territory.
Jesuses, I've seen black Jesuses, I've seen, everybody claims
Oh,
ownership.
if we're talking different race, then that's a whole different story. But with territory, it's like, you know what? One day he's Palestinian,
But we
one day
all
he's
know
Jewish
that
because
Jesus was a Jew, right? He was a rabbi. Like, this is not disputed. So the problem, this is something I was going to get into later, but the biggest problem about this conflict, and maybe other conflicts as well, I'm just not as knowledgeable. The facts are so distorted. Like, it's hard to have. How can I have an intelligent debate with you if we know different facts, right? So going back to history and just understanding the facts is so crucial, and it's so hard to do on social media when everything is a clickbait. It's a one line. But I will argue again, there was no Palestinian state. There was British Palestine. It has nothing to do with Palestinian state. These people were part of the Ottoman Empire. They were not a country.
just so that we understand the history right. Roman Empire, Ottoman Empire, British Palestine.
There must have been some other stuff
Something
in between, but
between, right? Because it was a couple of centuries in between the Roman and the
there was
Ottoman.
some control of Muslim. There was some Muslim control at some
Over the
point.
time,
There
right.
was the Christian Crusaders, so that was that type. So there were different parts of it. But modern history, so we could say, Ottoman Empire until 1918,
Right.
British Mandate until 1948, and then
What's the real beef? Because the real question was Hamas and Zionists. What's the beef, and how do the individual states or the states people inside the country feel about it?
all right. So Zionism was a movement of Jews started in the late 1800s to go back to Israel, which was, our homeland 2,000 years ago. There was always this kind of aspiration to go back to Israel. Part of the Jewish prayers is L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim Habnuya, which means the next year and rebuild Jerusalem. So we pray this every holiday, every weekend. So this was always a part of our religion or our culture, people. But the modern Zionism that we know of started in the late 1800s, and this was the movement that says, okay, it's time to go back, reclaim our homeland, create a state for the Jewish people. Hamas is a terror organization, comes out of Muslim Brotherhood, created, I'd say late 20th century, but I can't tell you exactly when. This is a radical Islam terror organization. It's not a leadership of the past. So it's not the PLO, the Palestinian Authority, which has been elected, many years ago and never had elections again, but controls the West Bank. Hamas was elected in 2006 in Gaza after Israel withdrew. 2005, Israel decided we don't want to control Gaza anymore. Withdrew, built a wall, let them deal. They elected Hamas. This is an organization that in the charter is the destruction of Israel, right? So this is not an organization that says we want a happy, safe,
Oh, they
free
have
country.
that in the charter?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, the destruction of Israel is part of their charter, funded by Iran, which is another country that, calls for the destruction of Israel, even though...
Yeah, I know that beef has been going on.
Yeah, of course, we have no borders with Iran. We have nothing with Iran. Like, there's nothing. It's radical Islam saying we don't want these infidels in the Middle East.
What they call it?
Infidels, Christian and Jews are
Well, I'm
infidels.
laughing because of how you said it, not because I think
Yeah,
it's funny, right?
If you look at the Middle East, look at all of the countries in the Middle East, look at the numbers of Christians. They are shrinking everywhere. There's not one country in the Middle East where the Christian population is growing except for one, Israel, where the population is growing year to year. And the same thing for Jewish population. So any non-Muslim population is either being persecuted, killed, or fleeing anywhere in the Middle East. Not arguing that all the Middle East countries are extreme Islam. I'm just saying that this is the fact. So Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis in Yemen, the Shiites in Syria, they all connect to Iran, right? So they're all funded by Iran. And it's all part of this agenda, which says destruction of Israel and creating a radical Islam state. I mean, we see Iran, right? So, I would argue that anybody who supports the Palestinians should be the first one to support the destruction of Hamas, assuming you want a free Palestine.
Okay, so you reckon that Palestine itself should go against Hamas and let Palestine and Israel talk this out, however?
Of course, put Israel aside for a minute. Just for the people of Palestine, if you're South African, you have whatever constitutional values, liberal, democracy, etc., and again, we can argue some of these values more or less, but we know what the core values are, and it's true for every democratic liberal state. When you call free Palestine, does free Palestine mean living under a regime that will beat a woman to death if she doesn't cover her hair, or throw you off the roof if you're gay, or right? So is this the kind of regime that we're talking about when we say free Palestine? And this is what we have in Gaza today. This is what we have in Iran or in other extreme Muslim states. I don't know if you've seen the video.
On that note, I wanted to actually ask, so in that case, if what you just described as, throwing somebody off the roof because they're gay or beat up a woman, and South Africa tends to support Palestine, do you feel like South Africa might be on the wrong side? And I mean, you could just take this from your view.
Yeah, I think there's big confusion between supporting Palestinians and supporting Hamas. So like I said, if you want to support Palestine, the Palestinian people, support their right for statehood, support whatever it is you want to support, I'm for it. I mean, I support Palestinians to have a free life. What this state would look like, this is a whole different debate, which I don't have good answers for. But of course, they need to have their own kind of normal life. Supporting Hamas, I mean, the fact that the foreign minister at the time, Nalini Pandor, called Hamas to, support after October 7th, this is obscene. I mean, again, a foreign minister of a modern, democratic, liberal country with liberal values is supporting this horrible terror organization, which is, causing terrible things to their own people. And then she's calling to support the day after they murdered 1,200 people in Israel. And again, this is not a military operation. This is, they were, they were killing babies and children and kidnapping women. And we saw what happened. And yesterday, by the way, the last body of the last kidnapped was returned. So this is a serious wound in the Israeli society that's going to start healing. But supporting Hamas, this is not supporting Palestine. I mean, this
So
is...
are you off the view that South Africa does not realize that they actually supporting Hamas as opposed to Palestine?
So when you say South Africa, I
I'm
guess you're
saying
talking about
I'm talking about the
government
regular
or
person, right?
official.
Because now we spoke about the ex I almost said prime minister, the ex for decor, what do they call them? Ex-minister, say supporting what Hamas did as at large. And the South African people, they actually don't understand the same thing.
I'm sure most people in the world don't realize. You see people marching in the U.S. and London, whatever, wearing Hamas strips, wearing carrying Hezbollah flags. I think they're not aware of what they're supporting because they some people would, but anybody in his right mind with some core values that are anything resonating with what you and me probably share could not support these people.
What would you say to a regular South African to say, hey, what you're supporting is actually Hamas. It's not actually Palestine because you don't know what's happening in Palestine. And what's happening in Israel is not actually what you think it is versus what you've been told. What can you tell a South African in just short sentences?
I would really, really encourage anybody who's interested in the conflict to just read a bit. I'm not going to tell you where. Just go do a tiny bit of research, not much. Read what Hezbollah or Hamas are. Read their charter. Read the Israeli independence, scroll of independence, okay? Now, again, we can argue about implementation, but just first understand what are the values of these two sides. And I'm not talking about Palestinians. Again, Palestinians deserve to have freedoms. They are not getting their freedoms from Hamas. Go look what happened. Israel withdrew from Gaza a few months ago with the peace plan. And the day after Israel withdrew, Hamas started executing in the street everybody they perceived as supporting Israel, or all their rivals, right? I don't know if you saw the videos coming out of Gaza, beating people to death in the street. Yeah, so this is not freedom for Palestine, right? So free Palestine is a great slogan, very easy to chant. Like I said, it's a great global cause. Everybody wants freedom. Everybody wants, everybody to be happy. You cannot support Hamas. You cannot support extreme Islamism. You can't, it's just not, it doesn't make sense if you understood the facts.
Okay. Moving on to something a lot lighter. Yeah. What does it mean to be a Jew? I mean, we did speak about 1948, where Israel did become a state of its own. But prior to that, if we actually look at historical facts, that the same Jew today is not the same Jew that came from Judea. So to put it, the diaspora is really, really widened. What would you say is a Jew? Because it's a Jewish religion. If Galveston Anthony decides he's going to, join the Jewish religion, he is now a Jew. So what is a Jew according to the definition, and how Jew are you?
So there are many definitions. There's a religious definition, as you said. There's a religious definition, which is very simple. If your mother's a Jew, you're a Jew. Or if you convert, okay, that's the only option. I'm not religious in any sense. To me, and this is my personal definition, Judaism is a tribe. This is my tribe. And of course...
Are you a Jew? Judaism. You are Jew.
I'm a
What?
Jew. I'm
You're
Jewish.
Jew, right?
I'm Jewish. I'm a Jew
Because if I understand it right, Jew, the original meaning actually means somebody from.
from Judea. Yeah, that's the original meaning. But to me, it's a culture, a tribal culture almost. I don't know if tribe is the right word, a people, which of course historically comes out of a religion. So the holidays that we celebrate historically were religious holidays. I don't view them as religious, and I mean this is true in every religion. When people celebrate Christmas, it's not because of the religious aspect of Christmas necessarily. They could not be Christian at all, or be Christian but not religious, right? It became a cultural thing, and it's the same probably for most holidays in most religions. I come from a very religious family. So in my family, of course, the holidays and the different regulations and rules have to do with religion. To me, I don't follow the Jewish religion.
You Christian.
No, I'm Jewish,
You're Jewish.
born Jewish,
Okay, but not the Jewish
75%.
religion.
Yeah, so I'm part of the Jewish faith, but I don't believe in God or in
Okay,
that. So
gotcha.
it's like you saying you're Christian doesn't necessarily mean you actually believe that God is watching what you do and go to heaven or hell, right? I mean,
I don't think that's how Christian works.
is it not?
No.
Okay, then I'll take it back because I don't know enough about Christianity.
Right.
So when I think Christian, again, I'm thinking Western European. It's more Catholicism, and you're thinking different. But I don't necessarily, I don't know. I can't answer if I believe in God or not.
So let me ask this. So someone from Judea, that's would you be your line? Would you be the sons of Jacob, like the
Yes,
ancient Israeli?
theoretically, yes. In reality, we can all do DNA tests, and
Trace back to there.
I'm sure there's a lot of mixture because, again, we have Ethiopian Jews and we have Russian Jews. They look very different. That's not
Right.
evolution. So obviously bloodlines mix throughout history.
Let's talk about look very different. There's black Jesus and there's white Jesus. There's Jesus with the blue eyes and there's Jesus. How could he have blue eyes? Because he was black. Now tell me, you're Jew and you would tilt more on the white side. Jesus may have been black or white. What is your guys' take as Jewish people from Judea?
I can guarantee that Jesus was Mediterranean, Middle Eastern looking. Jesus grew up in the Middle East. He grew up in Israel, right? Or what's his,
So would
whatever
he
it
would
was.
look Italian? Is that what he would look like?
Well, Middle Eastern, it could be anything from Italian to Egyptian to, Lebanese, whatever, anything, or Israeli today, right? So that kind of region. And that wasn't a time when people mixed so much across continents, right? It's not like today. And if you look 200 years down the road, I'm pretty sure most of the world will be some kind of, I don't know, light brown shade of, because everybody's mixing, right? We're not living in a world anymore where Africa and Asia and Europe are separated. So
if I look, just so we can put a picture here, because this podcast is mostly happening in Africa. So what do the mixture of, say, Western European versus Middle Eastern look like? Or Sicily? Sicily, they've got quite a mix of people there. That's what they would look like. But they don't have blue eyes.
yeah, the blue eyes came from Eastern Europe probably, right? What's today Russia, Ukraine, or that area is a lot of blue eyes. We have, like I said, in the 1990s, there was 1.1 million previous Soviet Union people who migrated to Israel. So we have that whole bloodline coming from there.
I mean, when we look at the territories of the Bible, right, it doesn't go as far as Russia.
Yeah, people didn't mix. They didn't go that far at the time. Of course, it was, it was months of travel. So that's what I'm saying. Jesus, he was Middle Eastern, whatever Middle Eastern means exactly. But anything that looking Arab, Middle Eastern, Mediterranean, that was the kind of look he
So
probably
how
was.
how would we describe the wool hair? Because I think there's a scripture somewhere that says he had wool hair.
Well, a lot of us do. A lot of people in the Mediterranean do, and the Middle East
Is
do.
your hair wool?
I don't know. Does it feel like wool? Does it look like wool?
I don't know. I think I've got wool like hair. So
Oh, is that more than wool? I don't know.
I'm just
This is
I'm
rough.
just asking.
It's not Asian hair.
It's not Asian hair. Okay, gotcha. Now, do you think the distinction between races, or the look rather, is what influences policies and relations between, say, the Jew people, so to put it, because the diaspora is really big?
No, this is a hard no. Within the Jewish people, like I said, we have Jews from everywhere. I'll say even more. Within Israel-Palestinian conflict or Israel neighboring countries, it cannot be based on looks because, as I said, 50% of the Israeli population migrated from the Arab countries in 1948. So if you grab an average Israeli off the street, chances are you'll have no idea where he's from. I mean, he could look a Mediterranean-looking one. He could be an Arab from, visiting from Saudi Arabia, or he can be Israeli that migrated from Morocco in 1948, or his parents migrated. There's no way you could possibly know.
So a Jew in general has a wide diaspora, even in Israel.
Very much. Well, not diaspora wide. It's a migration. Yeah, it's a migration country. So yeah, it'd be like saying American. What does an American look like?
I mean, they can look like anything they
Exactly.
decide to look like. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's pretty much the same thing. We're a migrant country.
Coming back to Palestine and Israel, but this time I want to bring, South African political parties, so to put it, right? ANC, pro-Palestine, hey, whatever, we behind you through and through, because, the ANC went through apartheid, and the Palestinian story kind of sounds like the same thing. And then DA stands with Israel. What is the relationship with DA and Israel? Do you want to explain that to me versus what's happening on the other side with ANC? Because you are in South Africa, so tell me about that climate.
So it's a tough one. It's not only DA. I mean, obviously, we saw a decision by Minister McKinsey there. What was it, a couple of weeks ago to write with the Biennale because it was a pro-Palestinian issue. So we have friends in the PA. Obviously, ACDP is very pro-Israel. IFP. So a lot of parties who are either pro-Israel or, like I said before, I'll go back and say I find it very strange that this is a big issue in South African politics, considering it has zero effect on your life.
You know what I say? It's like, why are you meddling in other people's businesses?
So it's good to have a moral stance on things.
Moral stance is great, but sometimes getting too much into somebody's business and you have no idea what is happening, just stay out of it.
Spending taxpayer money, attention, whatever, just energy, general energy on things that are not relevant to South African. I find it very strange, and I don't know. I cannot tell you why South Africa chose to take Israel as the cause that they are dealing with, ICJ, etc. I can say that, of course, the ANC policy is very pro-Palestinian and very negative to Israel in that sense.
But how do you feel about, the ICJ when, the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, took basically Israel to international court? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I feel terrible. I think it's, again, going back to what we said before about values. I mean, at the end of the day, Israel and South Africa really share the same core values. And there's a conflict, and I'm not arguing for a second that Israel is 100% right in every decision or every policy or every action on the ground. And if someone is arguing, look, this decision is wrong or this action is wrong, we can have a debate, and they might be right. Like, of course, there's a war, things are happening, bad things are happening. But to say that Israel, the country generally, is a country that should be prosecuted in the ICJ is ludicrous. I mean, and choosing to single out Israel versus all the countries in the world and all the terrible things that are happening in the world, some of them a lot closer to home for South Africans, where South Africa hasn't taken Iran to the ICJ. So this is not a policy of we're going to defend people who are suffering around the world. This is a decision to prosecute Israel specifically, and I cannot tell you the motives. I mean,
do you think the motive might be that the relationship with Iran and South Africa is pretty tight, so therefore Palestine is involved, so therefore the enemy might be Israel? Do you think that could be connected?
Perhaps, again, I mean, you would have to ask someone in the government or in the ANC these questions. I honestly don't know why they chose it, but of course, South Africa has sided with Iran on many issues, or feels a relationship with Iran. We see military drills, etc. We see ANC members now visiting the Venezuelan government to the Venezuelan embassy. To share. So again, coming from apartheid, coming from freedom struggle, South Africa has this affinity towards freedom fighters, I guess freedom fighters is a good word. I don't know, anti-colonialist kind of view. And you have to remember, Iran.
Don't you think it's more of a loyalty thing? So you had our back, so therefore we'll have your back, kind of thing?
I don't know. I would guess, and I would assume that 1979, when the revolution happened in Iran, that obviously resonated very close with the ANC, who was fighting their own fight here, right? So they were freedom fighters, or struggles. What's the word? Struggle, I guess.
You could call it struggles,
yeah. But what happened in Iran was not what happened in South Africa. So the struggle in Iran, the revolution,
it's completely
in Iran,
different to the one that happened
went the wrong way, and South Africa went, well, what we'd consider the good way, and I think that connection stayed even though Iran went the wrong way, and for some reason that tie hasn't been severed, which it should have, because again, Iran stands for everything that South Africa doesn't, and vice versa.
South Africa is more of a liberal state. Iran isn't.
Yeah, 100%.
But I wanted to get into something else a little bit deeper and a little bit more touchy. Jews are known to have a lot of money. It's like being Jew means you want to give me a loan because you're Jew.
You can't say that anywhere in the West. That would be a very anti-Semitic
Right.
statement.
But is the Jews or Israel funding DA?
Oh, of course not. Israel does not meddle in politics in other countries. I mean, this is a big no.
Then why do they have such a tight relationship?
If the Israel-Palestinian conflict wasn't an issue in South Africa, I think it wouldn't have been an issue for anyone, not for the DA, not for anyone. Once it is an issue and becomes a big part of the politics, the DA looks like they look at the values of Israel, and that's something that resonates with their own values. I mean, that's
Jeremiah 3 verse 17 says, at the time they shall name Jerusalem the house of the Lord. And then Luke 21 verse 24, they say they shall fall at the edge of the sword and shall be led captive into all nations. Many people could describe this as a prophecy that Donald Trump might have, fulfilled by having Jerusalem named, the capital of Israel. How do you and the Jews feel about that?
Jerusalem, like I said, for us, Jerusalem is the capital. Been so since inception. Since the beginning of the country, of the state, and it's been our aspiration since 2,000 years. So for us as Jews, Israelis, Jerusalem is always the capital. Funny enough, even the rest of the world today does not argue the sovereignty of Israel and Western Jerusalem. The argument is about East Jerusalem, correct? So I cannot explain why.
What is the argument actually? Because, as we see at 607 BCE where Jerusalem was destroyed. Now, this is from canonical citing. Jerusalem was destroyed and then it shall be built, a whole lot later being reinstated. Do you feel like Donald Trump fulfilled that prophecy? And with that being said, what is the argument between East and West Jerusalem?
So I'll start with the end. After the 1948 war, 1949, the ceasefire, Jerusalem was basically cut in half. So half of it was Israeli and half of it was Jordanian. So this is East and West Jerusalem. So the part that was Jordanian later was captured by Israel in 1967 and annexed by Israel. And this is what is called East Jerusalem. So the people living in East Jerusalem are Arabs who were Jordanian. Now they identify as Palestinians, but again, it's kind of a different group of Palestinians because they have permanent residence in Israel. So they're learning, working, living in Israel, not actually in the Palestinian Authority. Right? So they don't have Israeli passports, most of them, by their choice, by the way. It was annexed by Israel and they were offered citizenship, but as a loyalty or, they decided not to accept it. So they have Palestinian or Jordanian passports, but they are working and living in Israel. And then the Palestinian argument today is that for a state with East Jerusalem being their capital. So the argument is about that part of Jerusalem, which is not the western part, which was Israeli since 1949 or 1948. So Donald Trump, President Trump, moving his embassy to Jerusalem is to West Jerusalem, which is not it is not the part of the territory which is disputed. It's a very symbolic and very important move for us because, like I said, Jerusalem is our capital. I mean, for thousands of years, we view it as, it's a holy place to us, as it is to other religions, by the way. Very symbolic, very important. Some other countries are following suit. I would say inherently, for us as Israelis, it doesn't change the fact that Jerusalem is our capital. And if I could just say one last sentence about Jerusalem, Jerusalem is the holy site for Jews, Christians, Muslims. And if you go today in Jerusalem, have you visited Israel?
No, I'm too scared to do that.
Why?
I mean, wherever bullets are flying, I stay away.
No. Okay. Well, we'll deal with that later. See how we can get you to go, convince you.
I mean, I don't even go to Europe anymore because, it's pretty shaky right now in Europe. So I'm just
You're staying in very safe Johannesburg.
Yep. Yeah, Johannesburg is safe. I think I'll deal with the little guys that try stuff on the road. They're easy to deal with.
Well, that's a discussion about. But if you go to Jerusalem today, you're a tourist. You can walk. You could go to the Western Wall, which is a Jewish holy site, Temple Mount, and then you could go to Al-Aqsa, which is the Muslim culture. You could go to the Church of Nativity or the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, right? And you can walk in freely. It's all secured by the Israeli forces. How well are religious sites doing in Muslim countries? All right. Not very well. So again, as a Christian, and then now put politics aside, as a Christian, who do you want to control the holy sites, the Christian holy sites? The Jewish state of Israel or Hamas? What do you think would happen to the Church of Holy Sepulchre if Hamas controlled it?
I mean, the answer is pretty obvious because I mean that question has been cornered in that way. But I wanted to get into a little bit deeper. So if you look at the word Semitic, it usually refers to the Jews, the Arabs as well, and all the
Same family.
same family, Duzay, you name them. But when you say anti-Semitic, you specifically now speak of the Jews. And if you look at the language Hebrew and Arab, which I speak none of, you could see similarities in the
Not
words.
see. Very similar.
Very
They're
similar.
basically almost the same language.
And when you go into historical issues, territory's always been a problem between them. If you could go back to the Philistines, the Canaanites, the Israelites rather, there's always been an issue. Do you think this will ever end, or it's going to be an eternal beef between you guys, even though you're actually very similar, then more different?
So let me dispute one thing that you said. Philistines, etc. That was even before Semites, right? So that's before Muslims, that's before Jews.
Correct.
So that's a whole different argument.
Thank you for correction.
Later on, there was actually no real beef in Israel between Jews and Muslims throughout the past 2,000 years until, I would say, early 1900s. So there was always a very small minority of Jews living in Israel, in the thousands or whatever. By 1948, it was about 50-50, so maybe 700,000 roughly of Jews and 700,000 Muslims. They were living mostly peacefully. So were the Jews in the Muslim countries. Jews were doing very well in Morocco and Egypt and etc. So that's why I always make it very clear this is not a religious fight. The religion was there for thousands of years and they weren't fighting. I mean, there were issues.
It's not a religious fight. And what's
it's a territorial fight.
Territorial fight.
Territorial fight. And today, like I said, you have the Jews, and then you have this group of Muslims who became a group of people, Palestinians, let's say from the 70s on. They kind of were isolated from other countries because now they're not part of Jordan, they're not part of Egypt, and they're not part of Israel. So they started developing their own identity. By the way, Jews, so there's Arabs, the population of Israel is about 75% Jewish and 25 roughly percent Arabs. Out of those, about 21% are Muslim. Okay, so I would say a fifth of Israelis are Muslim. It's the third largest party in parliament, by the way, is the Muslim party.
Interesting.
Yeah. Going back to discussions about apartheid, which we didn't go into, but that's how ridiculous those arguments are. What happened in the war is families were separated, right? It was again, it's a random ceasefire line. So when you say Palestinians or Israeli Arabs, they could be sister and brother. It's not like a different race or a different nation or a different group of people. It's basically the same group of people that were there and got separated by war. So that's a whole different tragedy. But yeah, so then you have this group of people who are there aspiring for statehood. And unfortunately, and really unfortunately for them, their leadership has been captured by extreme Muslim Brotherhood organizations. Because, the Oslo Accords.
Something tells me that I don't even think they know what the fight is about. It's just you're born into a war, born into a beef, and you just have to continue the beef. That's from my understanding. Look, it might be a lot deeper than, how I'm oversimplifying it, but more so it's happening that way because there's arguments sometimes where there's a canonical sighting as well where the Israelites were promised a promised land. They did not get the promised land according to the sighting because apparently they were stubborn, so to put it. But then I guess there's an argument now that the Israelis want the promised land or they got the promised land. There's that fight too. And that's also about territory. Where is this promised land? What is it?
I have a big problem going back to biblical sightings or to religious history for the reason, not because I don't believe in it, but because if you decide to go very far back, it's endless. There's no country in the world, none of us were sovereign states at that time, and it was all tribal, etc. And we'll never end it. It's this discussion comes back to colonialist lines in Africa, but also in other places. If we start going back, then where does it end, right? These countries, the way they are drawn out today, weren't there 200 years ago, definitely not 2,000 years ago. But in order to keep some kind of stability, we accepted, the world accepted these lines. of the states today, with exceptions. I mean, countries are still, separating Sudan, South Sudan, etc. There's Somaliland. There are exceptions, but overall, we're accepting these states, these sovereign states as they are today, because otherwise it would be chaos. Not saying it's the best system. I'm saying it's the best one we have
right now.
right now. Same thing we say about democracy, right? Churchill said. Um, so we could go back to 3,000 years ago and who owned this land and who didn't. And of course, Israel, Jewish people would argue that we own this land 2 and 3,000 years ago. And that's a valid argument, except that if we go back that far, where does it end? And before that, there was someone else. So does he get the right? Did the Philistines get the right, whoever they were? But if we look at modern history and modern international law and international organizations, which is what we're all accepting elsewhere, there was a decision in the UN there was a League of Nations decided to give the British mandate in order to establish a Jewish state. That was in the 1920s. And then there was a UN decision to create a Jewish state and an Arab state. So this is, I think, where we have to start the discussion. Otherwise, it would be endless.
True.
And then again, the Arab state, which was decided by the UN, was never established. But on their account, that's nothing to do with Israel. They decided not to, and they invaded Israel. And now we're stuck in this situation where it started to look like there was an end, right? The Oslo Accords in the 90s created the Palestinian Authority, started creating different territories, giving them sovereignty of some sort. But then the Intifada started, and then Hamas, and then all these extreme organizations, Jihad, came in and went it. So I think the biggest tragedy over here is actually for the Palestinian people. I mean, they are the one who are suffering the most from the jihad or the jihadist organizations who are controlling them and ruling them and not allowing them to prosper. And at the end of the day, and this I think is true for every conflict in the world, what do people want?
In short,
Yeah, they
I
want to
want
go to
to.
work. Yeah, they want to go to work. They want to feed their children, right?
They want to
want be
feed their
happy.
children.
They
Everybody.
don't. Most people don't care about the big politics, world politics. Most people, they want to have a good life, and this has been denied by their leadership. Yeah.
Well, I will one day sit with a Palestinian ambassador as well, and then have that chat with him as much as I had with you as well. And I'm gonna try. I will be fair, not try and be fair. Be as
I
fair
would
as I
love
can
to watch
possibly.
that.
But just in closing, and in short, should Hamas decide that they're ceasing fire today, what peace and security will look like in Israel? 2 minutes.
It would be instant. The war would end. I'm not saying that the Palestinian state, would be established. This is something to be discussed long term. How this sovereignty, what would happen in the future, I don't know. President Trump has his plans. Other people have plans, and this is a very complicated issue. But the hostilities in Gaza would end immediately. And Israel said this from day one: return our hostages, disarm Hamas, we're done. I can tell you again, as an Israeli who served in the military, my children will have to serve in the military, right? There's no one who wants these wars to end more than Israelis and Israeli parents. The last thing I want is for my daughter to go fight in Gaza again, 10 years from now, because it's round 2 or round 3 or round 20. Yeah, I mean, if they disarm and they allow some kind of governance over there, which is a better governance, immediately the people in Gaza will have a better life because they won't be ruled by Hamas. This has nothing to do with Israel. As for future plans with Israel, what will happen, what kind of security arrangements, we'll have to wait and see. But it'll definitely be better than this. It can't get worse.
Well, let's hope that day comes and it's not too far away. But in closing, you heard this discussion, quite a sensitive discussion. Now, because of, online, you can't say certain things as opposed to traditional media. I would have loved to go deeper and deeper and deeper about this. But hopefully we can find a platform where we can actually have a second visit and
I
have
would love
that kind
to,
of
yeah.
that kind of chat. But like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you think in the comment section. Speak to me about what you thought I should have asked, and maybe I can have him here for the second time. So until next time, it's peace out.